I'm Mark Knowlton, the CEO and founder of TechScreen. Now, you may have caught our announcement yesterday where we're going to be pioneering something that we're calling dynamic engagement. It's a process that lets our users combine the use of advanced technical training content at the same time they're executing their core job. So literally using the training material to qualify candidates. In this case, we're starting with IT, but we're going to open that up to other expert fields. And so in the next few days, we're going to be posting videos that actually show you how you can make use of these knockout slides, so to speak, the information that explains advanced technical concepts and be able to apply that into how you're qualifying candidates. And so we really believe that we've found we cracked the code, to use a paradigm, in arming recruiters with the correct information at the right time. So the 4 pillars of dynamic engagement is, number 1, vastly simplifying subjects which can be extremely complex. 2, present them in such tiny, small, bite-sized bits that a non-technical person can actually internalize it and make use of it. Number 3, just-in-time delivery, presenting this information as the recruiter is actually doing their job. And number 4, removing the need for any type of rote memorization, the foundation of every other type of training that exists in the world for people who are trying to recruit people with specialized knowledge. Take a look at what our training content looks like. So let's see what the knockout questions look like. Let's go to application architecture. See what we have. Now let's take a look at the primary object-oriented concepts. Now we have abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation. And as a way to sort of illustrate these things, we're going to look over to the right where we have some examples. So abstraction. Now here are some basic questions you could ask a candidate. Obviously we just went through the 4 object-oriented principles, but what's a destructor? Or a constructor. A great question is like, what's the difference between a class and an object? All right, so a class is, think of it as a generically defined template or blueprint that has some specificity, but it's not an actual entity, where an object is. An object is an actual physical implementation of something that really exists in the world. So now this is a really good question you could ask an architect candidate, just to explain and describe the services-oriented architecture approach. Now, don't look for them to give you a verbatim explanation for what you're seeing on the screen. This is just a guideline. But they've got to be able to talk about things like the enterprise service bus. I mean, the idea of an ESB is to deploy a bunch of commonly used and reused bits of functionality that an application developer could inject into their app, something like a create invoice, check credit, check inventory. And you just want them to be able to, describe with some specificity and some command of how the SOA approach works. And these are some questions that are nice to inject, so you can just get your candidate talking, like, how does ESB fit in the picture? A web services and SOA are the same thing. What's the composition of a service? What's a reusable service? And again, this is just to get you comfortable in injecting this kind of technical interrogation as you're engaging with candidates. Another terrific question to ask an architect candidate. So, hey, compare and contrast the services-oriented design approach with the microservices approach. Now, again, don't expect them to get everything in the same order, but they've got to be able to comfortably talk about these things. Well, with SOA, you use a share as much as possible architectural approach, whereas with microservices, you're using a share as little as possible. This is a great question to ask an architect. Hey, so walk me through the pros and the cons of using the microservices design approach. Well, on the plus side, there's improved fault isolation because there's only one module. But on the downside, communication with services can get really complex. And again, these questions are kind of like table stakes type questions. Like, how does a microservices architecture work? What's domain-driven design? What are the main features of microservices? What challenges exist when taking the microservices design approach? Now, this is probably my favorite question in this whole module. Hey, what's the difference between a library and a framework? And as you can see here from this diagram, with a library, the developer's in charge because your code is sitting on top of library 1 and library 2. And you can see here on the left, here are some of the leading libraries you're likely to see on your candidate's resume. But in contrast, with the framework's in charge. The framework is sitting on top of your code. It's going to make the determination when to hit your code. And you can see here on the right, these are some of the leading frameworks that you're likely to see in candidates' resumes. And this, again, is a completely fair question to ask a candidate. It's language neutral, but they've got to be able to quickly and concisely describe the two differences between these. And it's content like this that's going to illustrate how dynamic engagement is going to be the future of knowledge-based recruiting.